Welcome friends to Farm Fresh Designs 59. So friends, in today's video, I'm going to be sharing part 2 of my cigar boxes. So let's get started. So when you get your wood cigar boxes, and I got all of mine from some local vape shops, they come with lots of stickers on them. So I have found that the best way to get all of those stickers off is to use my heat gun and just my little paint scraper and just slowly work my way around getting them. Some of them are really easy to come off, and some of them, well, it takes just a little bit more effort. Now on this particular box, I want a little knob, and some of you have seen me do this before. I put a little bit of air dry clay in my Baubles mold where I want my resin casting to stop. I pour my first set of resin in it, and as it begins to set up, I put a piece of wire in it. Once that sets up, I take it out and I pour more resin in that same little mold, and as it begins to set up, I take that first casting that has the wire sticking out of it and lay it on top. And then those two resin castings just begin to meld together. And then you've got a double-sided bauble mold that you can then use as a knob on top of this box. So I drilled a little hole in it, and I'm going to push that wire down into it. But while all of that was setting up, I painted my box with Dixie Belle, one of their blue colors. Now, in order for this to really set in good, I put just a little bit of Tite Bond Thick and Quick, and then I push the wire through it. And I take that wire on the underside and kind of pull out the two pieces, and later on you'll see what I do to get rid of that wire on the inside. And because Dixie Belle paint does not have a sealer in it, I used Rust-Oleum clear matte sealer on the outside, and once that seals it, then I go back with just different pieces from the IOD Rose Botanical Transfer set. And I use a lot of the little white flowers that are in it. And especially on the top, I need that flower to be over to the corner, but I just kind of cut those leaves to fit around that particular knob. And I'll do this after I put the knob in so that it will work its way all around it. And I get all of my IOD and all my decoupage paper from Decoupage Central. So in the description box below, I will share the affiliate links for all of those products. So if you've not used transfers before, they're super easy. You paint it and you make sure that it has a sealer on it. And then you're going to pull that back sheet off of the transfer and you're going to lay it down. And then the IOD transfers, all of them come with one of the little clear plastic sticks to rub over it. And you just use that little tool to rub all over it. And then I like to go back to the very beginning and I begin to pull it back off of that plastic sheeting, and then as it is adhering to the piece, I just like to kind of work my way down. Now within that transfer set, there's some different scripts, so I just put a little bit of script here and there. Then I put some different flowers on the bottom part, and I do it on 3 sides. And on the front of it, I want that transfer set to kind of wrap around to the side. So I start out by putting the transfer on the front, and then I kind of fold it over onto the back. And if you're not comfortable doing that, the IOD transfers have those little grid lines on it. So if it would be easier, you can just kind of cut it off at those grid lines and then do the extra part on the side. And then I just use a little bit of script here and there and just make it so that all of the box has transfers on it, but I don't put it on the back because I don't feel like it needs it. Later on, after it's all set up, then I go back with some wire clippers and just pull that wire off, and then it's going to be just a little bit sharp. So I'll show you in just a minute what I do to cover up that wire. Now this kind of box is really easy to paint the inside because there's not any little hinges on the back side. And so when I paint even the edges, it's not going to be adding more thickness to the box, which would make it harder to open. this particular style is just much easier to paint. So I paint the entire inside of the box, that same Dixie Belle blue color. I then pull out my IOD Felicity mold, and I'm just going to make one air dry clay mold out of that. So I put cornstarch in my mold, and then I just take some air dry clay, push it into that mold, and then I like to use an old gift card to kind of pull it back on the back and just take any of that excess clay off of it. Now, some people don't do that. It's just what works for me the best. And then just gently roll it over, and the gravity takes its course and it just falls out. And I'm going to put it on with Titebond Thick and Quick, which is the gray and the blue bottle. And then I just put it right on top on the lid of that box, and then that covers up that little wire that's a little bit sharp. So I go in after about 10 to 15 minutes and I paint it white. And then on the inside of this flower, I use a little bit of yellow paint. And then on the leaves, I use just a really light green color and just sort of dry wash it over those leaves because I don't want them to be very bold. And when I take different boxes, whether they're cigar boxes or whatever, I like to also do just something a little bit special on the inside, because if you're giving it as a gift, I just think it's really a treat for someone to open up that box and see something pretty on the inside as well as what's on the outside. And you'll see in all of my boxes today that I add just a little bit to the inside just to make it just a little bit special. And especially if you have a vendor booth and you put things like this in your vendor booth, I promise you when people open up these boxes and see that, that is a real selling point when you're going to be purchasing something like that. Now, one of the things that I wasn't able to show you is that I ordered some little legs off of Amazon and I added those to the bottom, and that was very difficult. And it just was really hard to film it, but they had to be screwed on. So I needed that knob to sort of match those little legs. So I painted it with Waverly's chalk paint in the color ink. And then I wanted it to match, so I'd use some gold gilding wax on top of that. And that is Dixie Belle Gold Gilding Wax. And I just rubbed it all over it. And then it takes on that same finish as those little legs. So what do you think of my first cigar box? I think this is probably my favorite today. So what do you think? Okay, so my next box, I want to really glam this one up. Now, this was not my favorite style of box. It had paper on the outside, and it was so difficult to get off. So I finally just gave up, and I just started painting it. And this is the new DIY paint, and I believe it's called Walk on Water. So I put a couple coats of paint on it because I needed it to be thick enough to cover up that paper. And then I'm going in with the IOD mold, and I hope I say it right. I really struggle with this word, but I think it's acanthus or ancanthus. I'm not really sure. So I decided on this particular mold, I was just going to use a lot of the pieces on this particular mold because they all really look well together. So, but on this one, instead of using resin, I'm going to be using air dry clay for these molds because these particular molds, well, they take a lot of clay and they would take a lot of resin. And so I just work my way through all of those pieces, and once I get some of it set up, then I kind of move on to the next part of it. And then I'm going to lay them out on the box to kind of figure out where I want that placement. And you'll notice that when I pull it up, it looks like a little wet up underneath. And that's because that clay has some moisture to it. And that Debbie's DIY paint, it is activated with water. So it did not mess up the paint at all, but it just made it just a little bit moist when I laid those molds on it. And then after I got all of those pieces on, I went back to that same mold and I made some little flowers just to put in between those, just to make it look more cohesive. Now, remember, once again, after about 10 to 15 minutes, I go ahead and I paint those molds because it really helps reduce cracking later on. And then I'm going to go back over the entire top of the box with that same paint. I could have just painted the molds, but I was worried that maybe if I did, then the top of the box might just be a little bit lighter later on. So I felt like it was just easier to paint the entire top of the box. And Debbie's DIY paint, it starts out darker, but as it dries, it lightens up a little bit. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to paint the entire inside of the box as well. Now, the reason that I'm not crazy about this style of the box is because it's going to have to seal really well because it's going to have cigars in it. So if you put paint on those little edges around the inside of the box, that is a barrier between the two pieces of wood. So sometimes it kind of sticks a little bit. So this is something that I probably will not ever try to sell it, but I'll just keep it or give it away because this particular box is a little bit more difficult to DIY. But, you know, if you're wanting to DIY a cigar box and this is what you can find, then this is the best kind you can do. So just kind of go with what you've got. Because in today's video, I'm using 4 different types of boxes. So once that paint is all dry, then I'm going to go back in with Dixie Belle Gold Gilding Wax and go all over the top. And I start out by putting a little bit, and then I decide that I really want it to be heavy and I really want to glam it up. So even after the first go round, I still go back and put a lot more on it. And then I want those edges to kind of maybe marry with that those molds. So I go around with that gold gilding wax and just kind of go around the corners of that box just to make it look cohesive. And then I'm going to go around toward the bottom of the box as well. Now, this particular box, because even after painting it, you can still see a little bit parts of the raised up paper on this particular box. So I felt like if I put molds all over the top, it would mask it. Now, I'm going to be doing a reverse transfer from the transfer set that came out, and it's called Etiquettes. And I've already used this transfer on something else, but I saved it because I'm actually going to decoupage this on. But I use this particular piece, this particular glue to put it on, and it's made by I'm not sure how to say the name, but it's called Gilding Adhesive. So it's somewhat like Mod Podge, but I'm not sure if I would use Mod Podge because this is a little bit clear, and I'm not sure how Mod Podge would do with it because the Mod Podge that I have is more of a matte finish. So I put it just on the back of that reverse transfer and put that down, and then I use another piece of the Etiquettes transfer, and I use the actual transfer on this one, so it's going to look just a little bit different when I pull it up. And this one is going to be more shiny than it will be the one up at the top of the box. And with the gilded transfers, you want to use that transfer tool just to go over the exact transfer and not rub it all the way around, because if you do, sometimes that gold will kind of flake off a little bit and you'll have some little gold spots on it. But you can see how that one is shiny and the one up at the top is not. Now, I need all of this to be shiny, so the finish that I'm going to be using is called Modern Masters, and it is a clear polyurethane, and it is in a satin finish. And I get that off of Amazon, and I will share that link below. And I really like it because it will really give the shine that you would want, as opposed to the matte finish that a lot of times we use on our projects. And so I'm going to go over the entire inside of the box, and I also use that same finish on the outside of the box just to give it a lot more shine, because that gold gilding wax gave a shine to the different molds. And this dries very quickly. And it's also water-based, so you don't have to worry about messing up your brushes as if it was like more of an oil-based finish. So on this particular box, I really wanted to glam it up. So once again, I found some little metal legs off of Amazon. They came in a pack, and I'm going to be putting those on the bottom, and you'll be able to see me putting these on. But I have to use my drill gun to drill some little holes in it, and then I'm going to put those little legs on, and the screws on it are super tiny, so it's kind of hard to get done, but I eventually get them on. Now when I get the little legs from Amazon, they don't have a real gold finish to it, so once I get them all on, I go back with that Dixie Belle gold gilding wax and go over those legs, and it really helps to make the legs look the same as the molds on the top. And I wanted to do more of a glam finish on this because all of us have different taste. And so I wanted to be able to show you on all 4 boxes just different ways that you could take just a regular cigar box. And actually the vape stores gave them to me for free. So just a free box, and really spice them up and really turn them into a beautiful treasure. So tell me, what do you think about this particular cigar box? So my next cigar box was probably the sturdiest box that I had. And I really like it. It almost feels like it has a leather finish to it. So I'm going to go in with Dixie Belle bonding balls because I want to make sure that that black covers really well. And then later on, I go back over it with Rust-Oleum linen white chalk paint. So on this one, I'm going to be using some rice paper from Decoupage Central, and I'll make sure to share that link in the description box below. And so I use my water pen to tear off that edge around it just to give it more of a natural finish. And if you don't have a little water pen, you can just take a brush and dip it in water. So with this particular decoupage paper, I just want it on the top of that box that's raised. There's like a little ledge on the outside, and so I want that just to be on the top. So I put down just a little strip of Mod Podge and started out. And once I put that first piece of Mod Podge down, then that first piece of rice paper, then I just use some cellophane wrap to kind of rub over it. And what I like about rice paper, as opposed to using a napkin, is rice paper is a lot thicker and you're rarely going to have wrinkles unless you just put it on wrong. And it's a lot sturdier. So that's why I like to use a lot of rice paper. And so once all of that gets put down, I'll let it dry. And normally when we put decoupage paper down, we use like a little sanding, little finger sander to sand around the edges. But because this is just going to be on that raised up square on the top of the box, then I go back with my little water pen to tear that off. But I tried to be really careful with this because I wanted the flowers to, on that particular paper, to fit in a certain order on top of this box. Now, I need to finish off the top of it just to hide those raw edges. So on this one, I'm going to be using air dry clay molds, and I'm going to be using the Trimmings 2 mold. And so I just take that little same credit card that I used to smooth out on the back, and I just put those two corners together and I cut it at a slant. Then I pull one of them up and I pull that little extra piece of clay off, and then it just makes it look like a mitered corner. And I put all of those down with Tight Bond Thick and Quick. And once these clay molds have set up for about 10 to 15 minutes, then I go back with a Dixie ball paint that's actually really this same green color that is in the decoupage paper or rice paper, whichever one you call it. And I go back and I paint that Trimmings mold with this green color, just so that it blends in more with the rice paper. Now I have one little flower left with this particular rice paper, so I use my water pen again to just isolate that one little flower, because remember what I said, I want the inside of the box to be just as pretty as on the outside. So I'm going to Mod Podge that to the little right hand corner. And if you notice, there was just like a little spot on the inside, and that was just a little wood disc that was off color. And so once I got this Mod Podge down, the part that I forgot to film was that I just used a little stamp from the ephemera type, and I just stamped over that to kind of hide that. And then I used my drill to drill a little hole into the front, and I used a knob from Hobby Lobby, and that just makes it easier to open. And I think it turned out really pretty. So what do you think about this particular style of the box? So this past week on my Facebook page, I actually showed those people that were watching the live some different cigar boxes that my husband had just got me. And so someone mentioned that you might be able to find cigar boxes at some wine stores. So when you're looking for cigar boxes, there's a couple different places you can find them. And, you know, it really is extra nice when they just give you the boxes for free. But this box is probably the sturdiest and the heaviest, and it really would make a nice jewelry box. Okay, so my last cigar box is actually one of those that you're probably going to get the most when you're looking for those cigar boxes. It's a really thin box. It's probably about maybe an inch to an inch and a half. So I paint that with, let's see, I think I paint it with a Dixie Belle green color. I really can't remember. It's been a while. And so I'm going to be putting a paint inlay over it, and it's the Rose Chintz paint inlay by IOD. And these are really easy. Now this one I did not do my best job on, and it was more of user error than anything. So you paint it once, let it dry, and then when you put that second coat of paint on, you put a little bit thicker, and then you mist that paint inlay, lay it down into that paint. You let it, then you're going to mist it again, and then you're going to let it dry for about an hour. Once it's dry, then you're going to mist it again and slowly pull it back. Now, I should have stopped right here because I began to feel a little bit of resistance when I was pulling it. But I just kept on going, and then in the long run, I just did not have that paint to adhere to the paint that I put on the box, just because I was a little bit impatient, and I should have misted it and just let it sit just a little bit longer. So I need to cover up that little spot where the paint inlay did not adhere as well. So I'm going to be using a resin casting of the conservatory mold that came out this past year. And I paint it with that same color, and I want it all to go well together, so I use a little bit of flour from that Rose Chintz to put in the center of this particular mold. Now I want the edges of this box to be pretty, so I just use a piece from the IOD Primitive Mold, and it's just a really skinny trimmings on this particular mold that I'm going to put on the front, and then I'm going to be putting it on the two sides. And once again, this type of box, if you paint the inside of it, it makes it just a little bit harder to close. Now on the inside, once again, I want it to be pretty, but because there's a lot of pink on the outside, then I decide to use Rust-Oleum Blush Pink on the inside of it. And it actually covers that writing on the top inside of the box really well. So to make the inside of this box pretty, and because it's more of a larger box, then I'm going to be going and using my IOD ephemera type stamp, and I'm going to be stamping just on the bottom side. And this is a little tool that I get off of Amazon that I use on my larger stamps. But once again, I messed up just a little bit. It wiggled just a little bit. So when I pulled that stamp straight up, it was not a crisp stamp. But I was okay with that, because also with these little boxes, people are going to be putting stuff inside of it anyway. And then on the top inside of the box, I use some air dry clay molds on actually a mold that I've had for a pretty good while. It's an older mold, and it's called Rosettes. And then I put all of those on, and then I go back a little bit later and I paint those with that same Rust-Oleum Blush Pink. Now, because I want it to look maybe just a little bit extra, then I'm going to be using the IOD Lock and Key, because on the bottom of this box, on the outside, on the part, there's going to be two parts, the lid and the bottom, and there's going to be those little pieces that you can kind of snap together. So this particular piece on the Lock and Key is the skinniest piece, so I put that on, and I go back and I use that same green. And then just to kind of make a difference between that mold and the different molds that I have all around the box, I just use some Dixie Belle white wax just to kind of soften it up a little bit, just so that these particular pieces stand out just a little bit more. And friends, here's the final piece of it. So tell me, what do you think? I really love this paint inlay. It's an older inlay, but actually Decoupage Central still has some, because this has been an extremely popular inlay. And it's just so pretty on different colors of paint. But I really like it on this green paint. And I wanted to put some little legs from those pieces that I got from Amazon, but they just didn't seem to be the right size. So I just left this one completely flat. So friends, as we finish out today, make sure that you go to my Facebook page, which is Farm Fresh Designs, and I will be doing live videos on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's just a good time for us to chat as I'm working on my project. And it's also a really good time if you have any questions. But thank you so much for watching today. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And make sure to hit the notifications button so YouTube will notify you when I upload my next video. Thank you.